Last time, we met a man the internet calls a heretic, a hot rodder from Wales who dared to do something most people thought was sacrilege: pull the engines out of classics and make them electric. Now, Richard Morgan, who everyone calls Moggy, has EV converted more cars than anyone on the planet, but his journey to get there was anything but a straight line. We left off just before the Discovery Channel showed up, and now we jump right back in around when Ed China of Wheeler Dealers helped grow a crazy little idea of Moggys.
Fast forward a couple of years later, and I used to love watching Ed China on Wheeler Dealers. You know, the practical side of things. It was just lovely to relax and watch, somebody like Ed changing the wheel bearing on an MG midget and just fixing up a car, and it was my comfort zone. And then I thought, if there was a window into the workshop behind me, a massive, huge window into, watching what happens out there, I would watch that all day long. It's fascinating what was happening in the workshop, and still is now. I mean, just to give you an idea, just behind the door here, it's a world of wonder. You've got all these like eye candy cars.
Oh my gosh.
Getting converted. You got a Ferrari Testarossa in the background, 356. It's 16 cars in the workshop at any one time getting converted to electric.
That's
and I
cool.
just thought, if there was an ability to just have a camera there, people would watch it. And I bumped into Ed China, funnily enough, at a car show. And I said to him, what I do. And I think he was already aware of me slightly. And he kind of helped me put a pitch deck together and just go and pitch it to a couple of companies. And he put me in contact with the production company that did Wheeler Dealers back in the day, called Attaboy Productions. And Andrew, the boss there, was a really lovely guy. And he was on board. He said, yeah, this is great. It covers three demographics. There's the classic car people that would watch it. There's the environmental sort of like guys would watch it because, less pollution and stuff with the electric side of things. And then there's the tech heads that would love it as well. So those guys that love the techies that get out a laptop and start programming something. So classic cars, eco warriors, tech heads. That's the first time all of those will be potentially watching a TV show. So they pitched it at a couple of channels, and some of those channels kind of wanted to change the format. And one of the things that was critical for me was I didn't want it to be like a pretend show like Gas Monkey Garage and all these shows that are they're scripted and they're pretend and it's not real, if you know what I mean. There's forced dramas. Oh, we got to finish this car for tomorrow because he's picking it up. No, they're not. They really aren't. I didn't want that falseness because certainly in the UK people see through that. It's just rubbish.
Yeah.
And I wanted some realism to it, so I just said to all the TV channels that were interested in commissioning it that it's going to be an observational documentary. It's not going to be a scripted kind of forced drama thing. And at that point, a number of them dropped out, which just kind of left mainly Discovery Channel. And Discovery Channel just took a leap of faith and they said, okay, well, let's embed a TV crew in the workshop, for 4 days a week. We had in this room here at least 3 people all the time. And they would, at any one time, they'd be looking out through the door just to see what's going on. They go, and all of a sudden be like a fire happening at the fire engine, at the fire station. There'll be the alarm goes, oh, they're putting the motor in the BMW. Quick. Out the cameras go, right, stop, right, go, now you can do it. And that was what it was like. So there was no okay, tomorrow, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start in the morning and you're going to come in from the right. You're going to shake his hand and then we're going to talk about this. There was none of that. It was literally oh, they're doing something out there that's relevant. Let's go out there and film. They're putting the seats in. They're doing the trimming. And the only thing that we had to do was I had to get and anybody that knows Wheeler Dealers knows that I had to get a Mike Brewer type character. The sort of person that had to go out and meet the suppliers and, go to the trimmers, take the seats there and meet the trimmers. And so like, show me how trimming works. And like, here's a sewing machine and there's the leather. I didn't have time to do that because, I'm running the workshop and, running the business here. So we got in a guy that, who, by some weird twist of fate, turned out to be a guy I was in college with, like 20 years prior, which was bizarre.
What?
Isn't it weird how life works?
It is.
And, bear in mind that college is like, near London. It's 4 hours away from me. So it was just weird. Peter Greaves, Pedro, came to be the co-presenter in that TV show. And it just worked. I mean, still now, we get people at car shows say how much they love that show. And it's because it was hands-on. It was showing how we build cars. Here's a guy with hammers and spanners and he's doing, work on a car and there's welding happening. And it's just real putting a car together, and even deep dives into, galvanizing. Let's send something to the galvanizers. And how does galvanizing work? Well, this is how galvanizing works. Or rechroming bumpers. And you go to the rechromers and you'll see all the, chroming processes and stuff. And it's still a big favorite with the fans now. And it was good for two seasons we did that. So it's 20 episodes, 20 cars.
Count me as one American, at least, that appreciates the authenticity that comes through in Vintage Voltage, and you should check it out. But what happened after that 20th episode was done? Well,
then COVID hit, and that kind of stopped all TV filming. And, you couldn't get the film crews up here and stuff. And then the other side of COVID, they were kind of, I think they were trying to get season 3 off the ground. And at the time, we got real busy. And having a TV film crew up here was going to be a little bit of a stretch. It was like 50-50. Do we do season 3? Do we not? And then I thought, what about YouTube? Should we do YouTube? Because it'll be less impact to the business. We can film it whenever we want. We can even do it on weekends, and we can do longer things like let's go on a road trip to Switzerland in some Ferraris, or let's go off-roading in Spain. And so I kind of like thought, thanks, but I'm going to kind of do a bit of YouTube now. And I think I make the right decision. I mean, it was something that we enjoyed doing as well. And it's just a bit of fun. You have your own control over it as well. Not that we didn't have any control over the TV side of things, but there was a formula where in the TV where the program had to start with the customer handing over the car and then going through the process of converting it to electric and all the other things that we do to it. And then at the end, you hand it over to the customer and there you go. So there's a start, a middle, and an end. Whereas YouTube, you can say, well, this episode is nothing about building a car. This episode is about, how heating works in an electric car, heat pumps, PTC heaters, etc. So you can do tech talks and deep dives and things that, don't necessarily fit into a formulaic TV show. So, the YouTube channel is something that I enjoy doing now. It's just nice and varied and it's fun.
So Moggy's talked about Porsches a few times now. And I think that the 911 might be, if not the, one of the most worshipped car shapes ever built. And so I had to ask him.
And so when you're starting to contemplate an electric conversion on that, what do you need to get right so that the Porsche person doesn't just walk away?
Good question. I mean, as I said, if you are taking something like a VW Camper or a Beetle or a Fiat 500, they're not a performant car. They're not something that's, people hanker after from a dream car perspective. So the first thing you need to bear in mind with a Porsche 911 is this is designed to be a performance car. So the drivetrain you need to put in it at least needs to be the same amount of power as the original engine that came out, and hopefully a lot more powerful. But at the same time, it needs to handle. It needs to go around corners. It needs to brake. It needs to have a driver feel to it, etc. So anything that you're doing on a 911 needs to always come back to the fact that, is this addition improving it? Is the weight balance better? Will it go around corners better now? What's the regenerative braking balance like on this? Because obviously your regenerative braking is on the rear axle. You can't have it too high, otherwise it'll be like pulling up the handbrake. So all the work you're doing on an electric 911 conversion is always with one eye on the performance aspects to make sure that it's going to be better in every respect than when it drove in under the power of petrol.
Getting the engineering right is one thing, but what happens when
a lifelong 911 driver then gets into an EV version for the first time? What is it like for them? What have you observed?
The first reaction is, oh my God, because the instant power, even if you use like the smallest Tesla motor, let's say 220 kilowatt rear small Tesla STU, even that has more punch than anything less than, say, a turbo 911 engine. So the first reaction is, when they put the foot down, is like, oh my God, what's going on there? And then we'll take them on a little test drive and, come back, and they start to, get a feel for there's no gears. They have to rewire their brain a little bit as to the driving side of things. But it only takes 5 minutes. And, within that 5 minutes, you come back and you then discover you've not just converted a car, you've converted a person, because they come back and go, oh my God, this is just insane how good this car is. And I normally let them sort of get what they want to get off their chest. And then at the end, they go, didn't you miss the noise? Oh my God, what noise? No, I didn't even think about the noise, But so anybody that experiences driving our converted classics, the noise, okay, there's no noise, but because it's replaced by so many positives and improvements, that one thing that's not there anymore is completely forgotten. But anybody that's just on the outside and hasn't driven it, they just concentrate on the noise. Oh, that car without the noise is not a real car. A Porsche without the Porsche noise isn't a Porsche. Really? What? So like a deaf person can't appreciate a Porsche? It still looks like a Porsche. Even when it's parked, you're saying it's not a Porsche because it's not making a noise. I mean, so I kind of get some of the comments like that, but they come from a perspective of they have not experienced it. It's a bit like a crazy person in an airport arguing with a pilot that planes can't fly. You know what I mean? They can. He's a pilot. He's been in the planes. He knows they can fly. So if you're trying to have an argument with somebody that has experienced something that it's not as good or, doesn't really work, etc., well, it's a fruitless argument because they know, they've experienced it. They know it's better. There's a lot of positives when you convert a car to electric, and at 911 you always have one eye on making it better from a performance perspective. And one thing I just want to add to that is one thing that revolutionized our industry, if you like, happened around about, say, 5-6 years ago. Because we like to try to innovate all the time. I'm not somebody to sit still. This is probably the longest I've sat still, for about a week. We're always innovating. And 5-6 years ago, we were the first to start putting rapid charging into our conversions, which completely transformed the game. That meant then somebody that gets an electric 911 can drive it like a Tesla across country if they want, because they can charge up rapid chargers and, that was before everything was like, slow charging. In the US, type 1, and Europe, type 2 charging, for instance, AC charging, overnight charging. Whereas rapid charging completely changed the game. And, nearly all of our conversions have rapid charging in now.
So fast charging changed the game for the 911 drivers. But
the Land Rover Defender crowd is totally different than the Porsche 911 crowd, but they might be wanting to take it off-road even, where there's no charging.
You certainly can't get any difference, any more different between the 911 and a Land Rover Defender. That's for sure. I mean, I did in the last few years. I've done 2 European road trips in our converted classics. We did a European road trip with 2 electric Ferrari Testarossas, or Testarossas as we like to call them. So that was fantastic. We drove all the way from Wales to St. Moritz up in the Alps in Switzerland. And the other was with some Land Rover Defenders. So there was 2 electric Land Rover Defenders and a number of diesel ones. And we went to the Pyrenees in Spain, which is like the border between Spain and France. And yeah, in the Testarossas, we were going through these mountain passes, like, switchback mountain passes back and forth. And it was just amazing handling and like loads of torque, etc. And then you try to do that in a Land Rover Defender, it ain't going to happen. You'll go around the first, you'll go around the first corner. You'll try to go around the first corner and then you realize, oh no, this is an off-road vehicle, isn't it? It might have the same power, but it's still a farm tool. So yeah, when I converted my first Land Rover Defender in 2017, and you can't make a Land Rover Defender worse, let's face it. And all the Land Rover Defender guys out there, I mean, to be fair, half of them will probably be in their hearts nodding, going, yeah, he's right. But the other half will be going, oh, spitting feathers, going, what do you mean the Land Rover Defender is the best car on the planet? No, it really is not. So, I come from rural Wales. I'm not a city guy or anything like that. It has an urban Defender, if you like. The Defenders around here are quite, often or mostly farm Land Rover Defenders. So for me, a Land Rover Defender has always been, a farm vehicle, that's just covered in muck, stinks of sheep, let's say, hasn't cleaned in years, barely scrapes through like MOT tests, which is an annual safety test on vehicles. It's just a glorified tractor. So when I converted the first one back in 2017, I looked at it and thought, well, there's no way to make it worse. So let's just see what we can do to really go to town. So we put a 450 horsepower Tesla motor in it, 100 kilowatt hour battery pack. And you have to put a big battery pack in the Defender because the aerodynamics is so bad.
Like a brick, yeah.
Oh, it's like driving a garden shed down the road. I mean, it's just awful. And also you got the parasitic load of the big tires and the axles and the prop shafts. And it's just, efficiency was never in play when they designed the Land Rover Defender.
So it's fast on road, but is it good off-road? He answered that and then told me the crazy thing his kid did.
I converted the first Land Rover Defender many years ago, and it was fast in a straight line. And it was only until I converted my Defender a few years after that I realized how good they are off-road, when they're electric. Because there is no reason to have high-low gear ratios because you've got your maximum torque from 0 RPM. So you don't need to change to a massively different gear ratio to be able to get the torque to the wheels to be able to go up inclines. It's there already. Electric has it in spades. You start with electric with too much power, if you like, and you need to tune it down. So, there's no high and low gear ratios required. I put a limited slip diff in the front axle and rear axle, and also in the Tesla in the middle. So there's 3 limited slip diffs.
Oh,
so
cool.
wherever the grip was, it was sending it to. So I found that I could go places where others simply couldn't, and I proved that when I went to the Pyrenees with all these other Land Rover guys. That I was able to do some obstacles in my electric Defender 90 that the others just couldn't get up. They simply couldn't do it, and I just went up there. And some of them I went up with ease, real simple. I mean, Driving an electric Land Rover off a road is literally child's play, to the extent where my kids learn to drive in my Defender. And anybody that knows my Land Rover Defender is probably holding their head in their hands going, you let your kids drive that crazy machine? Because it's 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds. It's the fastest Land Rover Defender on the planet. And, my 14-year-old daughter at the time learned to drive in it. Because what I did, I turned the power way down, obviously, and did max speed, 10 miles an hour. And but it's so simple. You've got a go pedal, you've got a stop pedal. And we were off road, obviously, at that age, you can't drive on the road. And she learned the basics of driving a car in a field, with, the world's most powerful Land Rover Defender. So, yeah, I love that thing. I've driven through rivers, I've driven through snow. We went through some beautiful mountains in the Pyrenees in it. So, yeah, anybody that says electric and off-roading don't mix, they need to go on our YouTube channel and just watch. Sorry, but I'm going to have to prove them wrong.
The Defender is one thing, but is it peak sacrilege? Enter the red Ferrari, the perfect car to enrage all car culture in one move, and he's done 3.
So something really weird happened today. We had all 3 Testarossas that we've converted to electric turn up.
Whoa!
So that literally, that was about an hour ago.
What?
So that is all 3 Ferrari Testarossas that we've converted to electric for customers were here, and they've gone. One's still here, but the others have gone. So yeah, Ferraris. So here's the thing, right? I've at this point, I'm rewinding the clock again. I had converted a VW Beetle, a Porsche 911. And was halfway doing a Range Rover Classic. And I think we might have started a BMW at the time as well. And this guy contacted us through socials. I said, really simple. I think there's like a comment on a Facebook post or something like this. It says, this is my car. What could you do with it? And it was a picture of a Magnum PI Ferrari 308. And I looked at it and I thought, well, I can make it better. And then carried on with my day. It was a throwaway comment like that, right? And he then got in contact with the office the next day and said, what do you mean by make it better? And I just, we give it more power, better handling, better weight distribution, just more reliable, less maintenance. Just make it better. Huh? Well, okay. I mean, and turns out he had a Tesla Model S already, and his wife had a Nissan Leaf, and this Ferrari 308 sat in the garage in between the two. But he'd rarely take it out because he was always worried about breaking down in it. And, anybody that's got a classic Ferrari out there knows that they're not the most reliable car, certainly when you want to enjoy them a lot in the summer. And to make them reliable, or not even to make them reliable, just to keep them alive, if you like, you've got to babysit those engines and the drivetrain quite a lot to just keep them on, alive and on the road. And at the time, he was having some problems with that car. He had it since the 1980s, and he was having some vapor lock issues. So, he would go on the motorway and pull up in the motorway service station, then it wouldn't start. He'd have to let the whole thing cool down, and then it would start again. And it was a problem that just wasn't going away, apparently. So long story short, he ended up converting that Ferrari 308 to electric. And I had to have that little sit-down chat with him to kind of say, are you sure? It's a Ferrari 308. Are you sure? Yep. Okay. All right, we'll do it. So then after that, we did another Ferrari 308. So we did 2 Ferrari 308s for different customers. And then we had a few years later, Ferrari Testarossa, our first Ferrari Testarossa inquiry. And I had to do the same sort of thing then. I was like, are you sure? It's a Ferrari Testarossa. It's a flat 12, it's a V12 engine in a flat configuration. And then the whole story came out again of yeah, but I've spent £30,000 on this car in the last 2 years, and I still don't have the reliability out of it that I need to be able to enjoy it confidently. And, told us some horror stories of him breaking down on, the side of a road. And there's nothing as embarrassing as breaking down in a supercar with the engine up like that and all these guys going past going, in your broken down Ferrari. So, and again, he had a Tesla and he was already on board and, realized the power of electric. And he said, look, if I could have the power and the reliability and handling of my Tesla in this Ferrari, I would drive it nearly all the time. I would drive it. So, but, we did have that conversation at the start to say, are you sure? And then, sure enough, we did that one and it improved it massively. Handling, if you think the Porsche 911 has a lot of rear bias, the Testarossa is worse because it has all the weight behind you. The engine, which is a big old engine and gearbox lump. And by the way, the engine sits above the gearbox, not in parallel with the gearbox in the 911. It actually sits up quite high in the 911. So that big flat 12 is sitting up quite high and the gearbox is underneath. But also behind you then is the fuel tanks, the exhaust, everything's behind you. So there's not even a fuel tank in the front of a Testarossa to keep the nose down. So the first time I drove the petrol Testarossa, when it came here and I drove it round a roundabout, there's a certain roundabout. I know you probably don't have too many roundabouts in the US, but, it's a very well-known, roundabout for me that, I know what speed to go in, the entry slight speed to be able to do a 90 degree and go right. And I came into it in the Testarossa, turned the wheel, and it understeered really badly. And I just had to bail out. I thought, I'm not going to make it round. So I had to bail out and go down one of the different roads. I just stopped. And I thought, what just happened? I phoned up the customer and said, is this normal? And I said, yeah. Testarossas, that's what they're like. They're quite light on the front. You really have to trail brake a lot to get the weight distribution to go down on the front to be able to turn. I thought, oh, that's awful. I can't have that. So by the time that car left our workshop, it was one of the most improved cars we have ever had leave our workshop compared to what it was like when it came in. It had double the power. It had amazing handling. It had semi-active suspension. So, the suspension automatically reacts to the road. I mean, just everything was so much better when that car left. But it still looked exactly like a Ferrari Testarossa. But what makes me laugh is the amount of rage out there for us converting a Ferrari, any Ferrari, but especially a Ferrari Testarossa, to electric. How dare you? Sacrilege, or whatever. So I'm probably not welcome in Italy anymore. I probably would have my passport taken off me if I tried to go on holiday in Italy because of converting, not just one Testarossa, but 3 Testarossas to electric over the years. But people need to drive that car because it is so much improved from when it was petrol. And I, don't get me wrong, I'm a car guy. I'm not a drivetrain guy. I'm not, completely addicted to electric. I love the nice V8s, still like, cars. I'm a car guy. So I'm not a tree-hugging hippie that tries to convert everybody I see to drive electric. I don't give a monkey's what car people drive, quite frankly. But I am very confident that electric, for me, certainly, is better than internal combustion engines. And I challenge anybody to drive one of our electric Ferrari Testarossa engines and then drive a petrol one and say the petrol one was better, because it's just not. It really is not. Okay, it makes a noise, but everything else, the electric one beats it hands down. But yeah, out there in the internet world, as far as rage bait is concerned, I don't think you can get better than an electric Testarossa to really stir up the sacrilege crowd. That's for sure.
I think that's peak sacrilege for sure online.
I really wasn't expecting that the most improved car after going EV was going to be a Ferrari. Sacrilege! No, really just kidding. But the next car he did is arguably even more crazy, but in a different way.
To an outsider, at first glance, it looks like a Beetle, maybe with a little bit of a body kit on it. But underneath, it is, I don't think it could be any different from the original.
See, so there's no car I've driven which has scared me more than Bug Zappa. That thing wants to bite my head off anytime I drive it. I mean, it's literally like a tiger in a bad mood that hasn't eaten for a week, and you jump on its back and say, yeah, let's go, and slap it on its butt. You know, that thing just wants to tear your head off every time I drive it. And I love that about that car. It is all shades of crazy. So when I first thought, I mean, there's three things I want to do in my life. Whether or not I do them before I die or not, I don't know. But one is Pikes Peak, one is the Baja 1000, and one is the Paris-Dakar Classic. And I thought, well, let's start with Pikes Peak. Let's build a Pikes Peak car. And electric is perfect for Pikes Peak because, you know, you don't have to deal with the thin air because there's no internal combustion engine. The mix doesn't have to take into account the fact that you are traveling 1 mile vertically over the course of the track. So electric, loads of torque, doesn't have to deal with the thin air. And, you know, it's quite a short course, so I don't need a big battery. So I thought, yeah, let's do Pikes Peak. Let's go for it. And all right, what car are we going to choose? Well, let's choose something that handles really well because there's like, you know, 152 corners in like, you know, 14 miles or whatever it is. And, you know, it's got to be sports car. It's got to be aerodynamic. It's got to handle. And originally I was going to go with an Ultimate GTR. And you'll probably have to put a picture of that up on the screen for those that don't know. But it's a proper looking race car. I mean, it looks like something that would be quite at home at Le Mans. And, you know, I started going down that path of like, yeah, let's look at the electric Ultimate GTR. And then I thought, you know, at some point I came to this conclusion of it's going to be a bit boring. I mean, it looks fast. What's the point of that? I want something that just doesn't look fast. Like, you know, let's do an ice cream van or something crazy like that. A post van or something. And I thought, well, there's nothing as slow looking as a VW Beetle. So let's do Beetle. You know, it's probably behind the Land Rover Defender, the worst aerodynamics in the world. You know, at 80 miles an hour, the whole back end of the car wants to lift up because essentially it's like a shape of a wing. Originally from the factory, they had 45 horsepower. So I thought, yeah, let's build that. Let's put 1,000 horsepower in it. Let's make it 4-wheel drive. Let's make it like central seating position, like, you know, fiberglass body. You know, let's do a crazy Beetle. It's like Herbie Goes Bananas with steroids, you know. So that's kind of where the Bug Zappa concept came from. It's just me coming up with a crazy idea and then sprinkling a bit more crazy on as we build it. So, and as I say, you know, that car, it's light because it's just a tubular chassis with a fiberglass body over the top. And I've literally stuck in, you know, full-on Tesla performance drivetrain into a car that weighs, you know, 1,000 kilos. Whereas a Tesla Model S performance is probably 2,000 kilos, maybe even heavier. In also shorter wheelbase as well, so the nimbleness of it, you know, it turns in beautifully. So yeah, that thing was bonkers, a little bit too bonkers. Anybody that's watched the YouTube series on the build will know that it was quite a handful, and we actually ended up dialing it back at Pikes Peak to be able to get it up the hill without killing anybody, because it was all sorts of you had to really concentrate and be on your game to keep that thing on the road. So I've still got it now, and we're putting a different drivetrain into it now. I'm going to try something different with some axial flux motors, and try higher voltage. And eventually we're going to do the Time Attack Championship in the UK. So
cool.
Yeah, it's not just like a one-trick pony. There was always a plan after we did Pikes Peak to kind of like, you know, do a race championship again, because I miss doing my rally days. Yeah, I miss that whole, you know, preparing for a race weekend and seeing how you're doing, competing against other people. I just miss that. So I want to get back into doing a race championship again. So that's the plan. Time Attack.
I love it. That's very exciting. I like time attack racing quite a bit.
And it's perfect and ideal for electric as well, don't forget, because it's not like, Le Mans 24 hours. I mean, it's a short stint. You're going out there, lots of power, lots of aero. So, yeah, perfect for Bug Zappa.
So what does a dead classic look like? Maybe sitting in a field or locked in a garage under dust and junk?
In this conversation, we started with this accusation, if you will, that you destroy classic cars. And I think that you have completely decimated that accusation. But just to kind of twist the knife a little bit more, do you have a sense of like how many of the cars that you have done through the shop were just barely driven and now are getting driven?
Oh, yeah. That's one of the Testarossas. I forget which one it is. I think it was the middle one we did. I've already mentioned that once we converted to electric, we took 2 of them to Switzerland on a road trip. On that road trip alone, we did more miles on one of those Testarossas than it had done in the past 20 years.
Whoa.
So that, and bear in mind, in the UK, you've got like, a good history file with Ferraris, and you can also with MOTs every year, you can see what the mileage is of them. So more miles in that than it had done in 20 years in just one road trip. And that tells you all you need to know about the benefits of converting a classic car to electric. You have the confidence to be able to drive them and enjoy them as daily drivers, if you want, or on long road trips. There was no, overheating. There was no like, oh, why is it not starting this morning? Or what's that misfire? Or that noise that wasn't there before? What's that rattle? None of that. You just get in, turn the key, and enjoy your drive and your adventure. And, that's what I love about converting classic cars. It's allowing people to enjoy their classic cars without the negative aspects of enjoyment or ownership, if you like, with literally zero maintenance, fantastic reliability, and the confidence for you to like go on a trip without needing to carry half of your toolkit with you.
Is there a car that you haven't been able to build yet and convert yet, but that you would just say yes to in a heartbeat?
Lamborghini Countach. I just want to make sure everybody can hear that. Lamborghini Countach, please. Anybody out there, send this way. So, yeah, that's the one car we haven't done yet that I am dying to do. Whether or not it's a replica or a real one, I don't care. But I really Lamborghini Countach, because that was my poster car as a child. That was, I had the big, huge poster of the Stone Roses and some other bands in Spiral Carpets, etc. And then pride of place was this huge poster of a Lamborghini Countach. And, that to me would be the pinnacle of converting classic cars to me. I would just love to convert one of those. And I've driven one. And, so it's not just the fact that, I love the look of them. Or the fact that it's my poster child as a kid. It's the fact that I've driven one. And I say this from a point of view of love of that car. That car is awful to drive. Awful. It's hideous. I mean, the driving position is wrong. Anybody that's over, say, 5'10" can't even fit in it. You've got the engine just right behind you, right there. And you drive an hour and you're getting baked from the rear by this engine there. And there's this massive, huge transmission tunnel, right there as well. And, everything just feels wrong. The clutch pedal is really hard as well. And if the aircon doesn't work, which, the one that I drove was barely working, you got this little tiny window to try to get some fresh air in. So you're not just getting baked. And handling, if I thought the Testarossa was bad, the Lamborghini was awful. This huge lump behind you and no weight on the front. And so to look at it, a Lamborghini Countach is fantastic. Just don't drive one. But when I got out of that test drive, when I looked at one a long time ago to consider converting one, I got out of it and thought, you know what? This would be so much better electric. You would get rid of that transmission tunnel. You would have more space inside the cockpit. You can move the seat to where it needs to be rather than over a little bit at a weird angle. You can move the bulkhead back because you haven't got the massive, huge engine literally an inch away from the bulkhead. So we could move that 3 inches back, which means now you've got a better driving position. You got more room internally. You would have a little bit of weight on the front axle as well with the battery pack in the front. You would just be able to make it perform and handle as good as it looks. And that, to me, is the best respect you can give to a classic car that looks that good. You make it go as good as it looks. And that's one of the main reasons why I would like to convert a Lamborghini Countach to electric, because I would just nail that car, to be such a better driving experience than when it was petrol.
Somebody get this man a Countach! Yet another car that owners rarely drive. Have you even seen one of those tiny rear windows? It's silly. To be a little poetic, a classic needs to drive to live. One of his electric Testarossas covered more miles on a single road trip through the Alps than it had traveled in the previous 20 years of its life. That's a car that gets driven because someone trusts it enough to turn the key. And now people get to smile seeing that horse in the wild once again. Poetic rant over, and now back to the meat and potatoes. Does Moggy's story inspire you to convert a car? And if so, what would it be? A weekend warrior, a track weapon, or a stylish cruiser? Let me know. Until next time, we'll be back with more dispatches from the garage and the racetrack.